This process is thought to have originated in 1946 by Vincent Schaefer, a chemist employed by General Electric. Cloud seeding is a method for artificially producing rain or snow. It requires modifying a cloud's chemical structure to boost the chances of precipitation with the added substance of silver iodide, which works as a condensation agent. There are two ways to disperse cloud seeding agents, either using large cannons to shoot the particles into the sky, or using airplanes to drop the particles from above.
Project Cirrus is the first official attempt to modify a hurricane. It was run by General Electric with the support of the U.S. military. The official theory was that by changing the temperature outside the eye wall of a hurricane, which they did by seeding the clouds with various compounds such as silver iodide, a decrease in strong winds will result. On October 13, 1947, Project Cirrus targeted a hurricane heading out to sea. Approximately 180 pounds of dry ice was dropped into the clouds. The crew then reported a pronounced modification of the cloud deck, and the hurricane abruptly changed direction and made landfall near Savannah, Georgia. The public blamed the government. Irving Langmuir, who pioneered General Electric's atmospheric research department and admitted that the project was about learning how to weaponize the weather, also claimed the reversal of the hurricane had been caused by Project Cirrus. But the government denied it for 12 years.
Mike, initial altitude of 2,000 to visual, clear for takeoff.
The first real demonstration that man was able to alter the course of the weather came a little over 20 years ago. In 1946, two scientists in the United States discovered that by dropping pieces of dry ice from an aircraft into a cloud, they produced a snowstorm. The idea was immediately taken up in Australia by the CSIRO Division of Radiophysics, and experiments were soon underway to find out whether extra rain could be stimulated by this method.
Since then, countries all over the world have experimented with different ways to squeeze rain out of the clouds. China spends more on cloud seeding than any other country in the world.
In 1961, Congress directed the Bureau of Reclamation to begin a long-range study of cloud seeding, with the aim of eventually augmenting the nation's supply of water. The program, called Project Skywater, continues at many sites throughout the United States. Eventually, if the research program proves successful, the methods learned will become part of our nation's integrated water resources program.
But in September 1961, the National Hurricane Research Project, along with the support of the Navy, seeded Hurricane Esther with 8 cylinders of silver iodide, and the wind strength decreased by 10%. This success brought back fresh excitement about the idea of controlling the weather. So in 1962, Project Storm Fury was greenlit under President John F. Kennedy. The scientists tried to expand the project into places like Guam, but China felt threatened and said that if they did capture a wild hurricane and Pokeball throw it at the Chinese shores, they would not be happy and would make sure everyone else knew it. Fidel Castro also outright accused the United States of attempting to weaponize hurricanes. I mean, storms. So everywhere they tried to go, it just fell apart. When no progress was being made and everyone was being so picky about the kinds of hurricanes they could test, the Navy got bored and finally pulled out of the project. Then, the final kicker came in 1980 when Hurricane Allen rolled through the Atlantic, Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. The scientists watched it closely and noticed that the eye walls were changing in diameter all by themselves without any seeding happening at all. And then suddenly they realized that the updrafts from the storms would have negated any supercooling attempt they had made over the past decades. In other words, not only had they just wasted dozens of years of their lives and millions of taxpayer dollars, but all of the results they saw were just natural movements the hurricane would have made with or without their dry ice or iodide. So in 1983, Project Storm Fury was shut down. Its 100 employees, yes, 100 people were fully dedicated by the government to this. They were fired from the project. On the bright side, they do still stand by the fact that we learned an incredible amount of information we didn't have before on hurricanes before Project Storm Fury.
War reached a crossroads. The U.S. Army had important decisions to make if they wanted to tip the scale back to their side. All options were on the table, both conventional and unconventional. And among the most unusual plots was Operation Popeye, launched in an attempt to weaken the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the Viet Cong's most vital mechanism and supply flow tool. To accomplish this, the U.S. would turn the weather into a weapon of war. Operation Popeye utilized cloud seeding technology, a type of weather modification that artificially creates rain or snow. With it, the U.S. military extended at least 5 monsoon seasons, causing detrimental effects to the unknowing Vietnamese citizens and soldiers. The mission spanned 5 years and cost taxpayers over $15 million. Despite multiple hearings in Congress, military officers, and even President Nixon himself denied it existing at all. The first flight of the operation took off on March 20th, 1967. A total of 2,602 flights were made in 5 monsoon seasons, from March to November. The 54th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron executed the cloud seeding procedure using the slogan, "Make mud, not war." Scientists are not sure they understand its long-term effect on the ecology of our region. A few days after the story's publication, the entire program was officially ended, and all cloud seeding missions stopped. Silver iodide, a material used in cloud seeding condensation, is known to be toxic to aquatic life. So when used in the long term, precipitation from seeded clouds could harm the environment. Especially environmental activists found out that America had secretly been playing God and altering the weather in Vietnam. They were outraged. The operations were dubbed the Watergate of weather warfare. Operation Popeye was officially terminated on July 5th, 1972. In 1977, the U.S. joined the Environmental Modification Convention Treaty, or ENMOD, an international treaty which formally banned weather modification for malicious purposes. The agreement banned causing earthquakes and tsunamis, steering hurricanes, or tampering with the ionosphere. It also prohibited any kind of severe damage to the environment. Since cloud seeding has never been used in warfare again, the results cannot be measured or compared. Author James Roger Fleming agreed, stating, quote, "Although some claim that Operation Popeye induced from 1 to 7 inches of additional rainfall annually along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, no scientific data were collected to verify the claim." Even if Operation Popeye did help a few U.S. victories in Vietnam, a fact that is impossible to determine, its extreme secrecy and denials by the military and the government resulted in a significant strategic defeat for climatic modification with military purposes.
The 80s were all about big hair, neon, MTV, and then there was this.
Every October, a hole appears in the ozone layer over the South Pole.
The hole in the ozone shield is the size of the continental United States.
The protective ozone layer is being threatened as never before. We're all at risk.
Scientists warned that humanity was on track to completely destroy the ozone layer by 2050. Without it, ecosystems would collapse, skin cancer rates would skyrocket, and life as we know it would cease to exist. But today, the ozone layer is healing. In an unprecedented act, the world came together to prevent an environmental catastrophe. So, how did we do it? And what can we learn from it? They all came to the same conclusion. The biggest problem was chlorine from a man-made compound called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. On the ground, CFCs aren't harmful. But once they float up to the stratosphere, the sun breaks them down into chlorine. They bind with ozone to make oxygen and chlorine monoxide. Then the loose oxygen atoms bump the chlorine atom out, freeing it to destroy more ozone molecules. And that causes a chain reaction. Then we used a lot of CFCs. The US had already moved away from CFCs in aerosol cans. But most of the world hadn't yet. And they were still in everything from refrigerators and air conditioners and styrofoam. The entire world needed to make a big change quickly, or we'd face
catastrophe, unmitigated catastrophe.
Scientists like Dr. Solomon held press conferences to every single country eventually signed the protocol, making it the only universal treaty to ever be ratified, and the most successful environmental agreement in human history. The world's largest CFC producer began to phase them out. Since the protocol went into effect on January 1st, 1989, the consumption of ozone-depleting substances, including CFCs, plummeted. Today, more than 30 years after the Montreal Protocol was signed, the ozone hole has stopped growing, and it's now shrinking. And by 2065, it is expected to have recovered completely. But there's more to be done. After the CFC ban, we began using hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. HFCs don't deplete the ozone layer, but they are a potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. And it's the fastest growing one. So in 2016, the Montreal Protocol was amended to include HFCs, and now they are being phased out too. But they are only one part of a larger issue.
Climate change is already happening right here, right now.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
The Earth is surrounded by a layer of gases called the atmosphere. Think of it like a giant blanket. This blanket traps some of the sun's heat, keeping our planet warm enough for life. This is called the greenhouse effect. But wait, there's more. Human activities like burning fossil fuels add extra greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. This makes the blanket too thick, trapping too much heat and causing global warming. So what can we do? Simple changes like using renewable energy, planting trees, and reducing waste can make a huge difference.
In 1979, climate specialists gathered at the first World Climate Conference. Observations provided a new perspective of our planet as an interconnected system of atmosphere, ocean, land, and life. The World Climate Research Program, WCRP, was established a year later. It provides a platform for international collaboration to understand the evolution of our climate system and the influence that humans have on Earth.
In 1986, a mysterious cloud emerged from this African lake, and because it was heavier than air, it ended up descending on a nearby village. The people and animals of this village started to go unconscious, and thousands ended up losing their lives. So what happened? Well, this mysterious cloud contained 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide, and to this day, geologists still don't know what triggered its release.
Did you know the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 led to a massive decrease in sulfur dioxide emissions? Sulfur dioxide is a powerful pollutant created through industrial practices and factory emissions. This pollutant is the culprit of acid rain. However, the clouds carrying acid rain became polluted in the Midwest and moved east with the wind. So the factories creating the sulfur dioxide didn't experience the negative effects of acid rain. Before regulations were put into place, the eastern U.S. experienced pollution of drinking water and soil, which affected farming in those states. Sulfur dioxide also irritates the lungs, and people with asthma had difficulty breathing. So the Clean Air Act required factories to purchase pollution permits. In other words, factories had to buy their rights to emit sulfur dioxide. By allowing factories to purchase and trade these permits, factories had the choice of buying permits or investing in new technology. Now, with cooperation by the factories and regulations set by the Clean Air Act, factories emit a minimal amount of sulfur dioxide. Recently, the soil and water in the East has recovered, and agriculture has improved. The 1990 amendments ended the production of acid rain through the regulation of factories. So policies which help the environment also help the economy. And regulations of other big pollutants like carbon dioxide or lead could follow similar patterns in the future.
From Paramount Classics comes a film that has shocked audiences everywhere they've seen it.
The Arctic is experiencing faster melting. If this were to go, sea level worldwide would go up 20 feet. This is what would happen in Florida. Around Shanghai, home to 40 million people. The area around Calcutta, 60 million. Here's Manhattan. The World Trade Center Memorial would be underwater. Think of the impact of a couple 100,000 refugees, and then imagine 100 million. We have to act together to solve this global crisis. Our ability to live is what is at stake.
Weather modification today is an increasingly precise science which can reap huge benefits for the many countries that suffer from severe water shortages.
In the last few years, we've literally been on all 5 continents. A lot of our work focused on Southeast Asia, Africa, North and South America, and then also in Europe, Italy and Greece. There are currently more than 47 countries, more than 150 programs, cloud seeding programs, going on as we speak.
Ron, you can go back.
Everyone knows what a contrail looks like. You see a jet in the distance, and you see a white trail hanging off the back of it, and as it, just about at the same speed the jet moves, the contrail follows behind it and evaporates almost at the same rate that the jet travels. You see, it seems to keep a fairly consistent trail behind it as it travels through the sky. These trails are left by the jet and linger for an hour, hour and a half, and they start to spread and dissipate after the jet is long gone. There is absolutely a difference between these two things, and people trying to tell you otherwise are not being honest.
This is you. You've probably been hearing a lot about climate change and how you should reduce your carbon footprint. But what is that exactly? Just like an actual footprint, it's a mark you leave upon the environment. No, not with your shoes, but with every action that releases carbons. Those are the harmful gases, such as CO2, which are pumped out by burning fossil fuels like oil or gas. The more fuel you use, the bigger your footprint will be.
Fight climate change by using Energy Star's CFLs and LEDs. They last longer, cost less, and cut your carbon footprint. If every home in America replaced the 5 most used bulbs with Energy Star ones, we would save about $8 billion each year in energy costs and prevent greenhouse gas emissions equal to 10 million cars. Reduce carbon pollution. Act on climate change.
Now, a report has just been released by Beijing's Tsinghua University revealing that the government artificially changed the weather for that event. Peter O'Brien, France 24's technology editor, is here to tell us more. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Annette.
It's not the first time that China has reportedly hacked the weather for a major event. Most famously, they did it for the Beijing Olympics back in 2008. So
green and foul, and it just won't go away. Acres of unwanted algae are blemishing China's Olympic sailing venue in the coastal city of Qingdao just 1 month before the competition begins.
It's a roadblock, and we just can't really go through it because it actually slows down our speed, and that's going to hinder our performance.
We are ready! 1 year ago, China boasted it was ready for the Olympic spotlight. But since then, it's been hitting the headlines for all the wrong reasons. 2008 began with China's worst snowstorms in 50 years. Then, May's earthquake devastated China's Sichuan province, leaving more than 87,000 dead or missing. 5 million more were left with nowhere to live.
This string of natural disasters has left many here wondering whether a cloud of bad luck is hanging over China. And that's no laughing matter in a country where superstitions run deep.
Are chemicals being dropped on us by the government? I'm giving you a second to really digest this.
You uncovered a lot of these hidden chemicals. Where's the connection with the chemtrails?
Well, the connection is, at first, when I saw these large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium oxides and sulfates, I thought, well, this could be for an industrialized process, for something called shot peening or, bead blasting, things that you see in kind of the automotive industry. Except those were already accounted for. I already knew how much was used for those processes. It was a little type of different constituent. And the first thing I did, part of my job was to sample air, soil, and water. So that's what I did. I air sampled the soil, the air, and the water. And due to my profession, I know at which levels or limits of detection you need to check that at. And the amount of pollution that was in my area, and this is tests I did in Oklahoma, in Georgia, in Chicago where I'm now. But in taking those samples, I knew the background, because a lot of these things are naturally occurring and elemental, but not in this form and not in this quantity. So how did it get there?
Don't worry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I couldn't even hear myself. This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And as it turns out, the cleanest.
Now, the most amazing thing is that that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain.